maybe you guys just crawled out of bed, but that first half from the Los Angeles Sparks might have been some of the worst basketball from a team I have seen in quite some time. That first half from the Los Angeles Sparks looked bad. Shooting 39% from the field, shooting 20% from the field. That was bad news bears. I'm seeing wide open threes, like the distance between me and California, the amount of space these players are getting. Brick. And it's not like in and out brick. It's not like...
Stephanie White was visibly shaking on the sideline as the lead evaporated into thin air. It was supposed to be a Caitlin Clark masterclass, a statement game that silenced every single critic in the building. Instead, it turned into a horror show that nearly cost the Indiana Fever everything. The Sparks were crawling out of a grave that everyone thought was already sealed shut. You could see the panic in the coaching staff's eyes as the momentum shifted violently. This wasn't just a close game. It was a total systemic collapse that threatened to ruin the best performance we've seen from Clark in weeks. The atmosphere in the arena went from celebratory to pure, unadulterated terror in a matter of minutes.
Backboard break, we're talking missing everything break. It was bad. Erica Wheeler from a brokey like myself, I know you think you're better than me because you do OnlyFans or whatever the hell else, and now you make a ton of money, so I understand. You still can't make a layup. You get the ball, you go to make a layup, you miss it off the bottom of the rim, you get the ball back, you're scared that you're gonna miss it again, so then you kick it out to a wide open three, and that wide open three is a break. Bad news bears. We got post players catching the ball on the block, back to the basket, facing up as they're doing a move to face up, hitting the ball off their knees. Yeesh. I'm telling
the Los Angeles Sparks looked like they had just crawled out of bed during that first half. It was some of the worst basketball I have seen from a professional team in quite some time. We are talking about shooting 39% from the field and a miserable 20% from the three-point line. There were wide open looks where the distance between the shooter and the defender was as wide as the state of California, and they weren't just missing, they were throwing up bricks that hit the backboard or missed everything entirely. It was an absolute disaster that should have resulted in a blowout, but somehow, the Fever let them back into the contest when it mattered most.
Quiet third quarter. Quiet fourth quarter. Aaliyah Boston, I'm gonna be as nice as I can be. If you can't move 117-pound Cam Brink out of the way on the lower block to get post position, since we're not running pick and rolls anymore, that's on you, mama. If you can't move all 117-pound Cam Brink out of the way on the low block, that's on you, mama. I need to start seeing some development in our post game. We can't just be one-dimensional pick and roll, 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 pick and roll.
Caitlin Clark started the game like she was on a mission from another planet. In the first 3 minutes alone, she dropped 7 points and looked completely unstoppable. It was a tale of 2 quarters for CC, as she transitioned from a pure scorer in the first to a master facilitator in the second. She was getting everyone involved and pushing the tempo in a way that left the Sparks gasping for air. When she is aggressive and taking the ball right to the rack, she proves she is one of the best finishers around the basket in the entire league. But then, something shifted in the coaching strategy, and the Masterclass started to lose its rhythm as the Sparks began their improbable run.
Lexi Hall, Michaela Timpson, Raven Johnson, Stephanie White. I gotta be honest with you. I don't know why Michaela Timpson is losing time to Damaris Dantas or Maisha Hines-Allen. I don't get it. It makes 0 sense to me. I'm not understanding. I need somebody to explain. Michaela Timpson misses 1 layup and you put her on the bench. Damaris Dantas doesn't even play defense, and you keep her on there, and then Monique Billings. I'm not sold on Monique Billings. Honesty is the best policy.
The frustration with Caitlin's shot selection is starting to boil over for some fans. She went 1 for 7 from the three-point line, and almost all of those misses were difficult step-back jumpers. Here is the kicker. She was 1 for 1 on catch-and-shoot opportunities. Why isn't Stephanie White drawing up plays to get her more of those high-percentage looks? If the step-back isn't falling, you have to manipulate the defense to get her open off the ball. Instead, the offense becomes stagnant, and Caitlyn is forced to settle for low percentage shots that give the opposition a chance to transition. It is a coaching failure that nearly cost them the game against a team that shouldn't have been close.
Taking it right to the rack. Caitlyn Clark. That game's underrated when you just take it to the rack. I don't think people realize how good of a finisher around the basket you are. Don't sell yourself short settling for threes. If they're not falling, they're not falling. Just don't sell yourself short settling for threes. If you'd have just lived in the mid-range and inside the paint today, it could have been nasty work. And one, ref calls it. They had Ray Burrell guarding her this game. They put on long, lanky Ray Burrell up behind the back, tweener, layup, right? That's what we want from her.
Erica Wheeler's performance in that first half was something straight out of a nightmare. We saw a professional athlete get the ball, go up for a layup, and miss it off the bottom of the rim. Then, she got the ball back, looked absolutely terrified to miss again, and kicked it out for a wide open three that resulted in another brick. It's hard to watch players making huge money while struggling with the absolute basics of the game. When your veteran leadership is fumbling layups and playing scared, it sends a ripple effect through the entire roster. The Sparks were handed every opportunity to stay in the game because the Fever couldn't capitalize on the most fundamental plays.
Again, folks, it's not hard to play with Caitlyn Clark. It's not hard. If she's doing this ISO shit, not saying literally ISO shit, but if she's doing ISO ball, you sit, you wait, you notice that your defender's paying attention to CC, and you get your fucking ass moving backdoor. It's not fucking complicated. Like, it's really not complicated. Just don't be lazy on the offensive end. It's not rocket science here. I know everybody likes to overcomplicate basketball. It's not that complicated. If your man is paying attention to the ball handler and sleeping on defense, cut back door. It's not fucking hard.
Then we have the post players, who were catching the ball on the block and literally hitting it off their own knees while trying to make a move. The Los Angeles Sparks were a walking disaster in that first half, yet they somehow found the energy to mount a comeback that sent Stephanie White into a total tailspin. You have players like Monique Billings getting 27 minutes of playing time and only producing 9 points and 8 rebounds with 3 turnovers. I am just not sold on her as a primary option, yet she continues to get heavy minutes while younger, more explosive talent sits on the bench. The rotation decisions are becoming a major red flag for this coaching staff.
By Cam Brink, sleeping. Look at Cam Brink, celebrating her bucket like she just won the Kentucky Derby. Meanwhile, Caitlyn Clark says, why are you celebrating for it? Give me that. Telling you right now, Cam Brink, I think I might be off the Cam Brink train. Watching that game last night, I already knew the frustrations that I would have watching her play. So I'm good on that. Monique Billings, 27 minutes, 9 points. 8 rebounds, 3 turnovers. I'm not sold on Monique Billings, man. I gotta be honest. I'm just not sold on her. I know people are hyping her. I'm just not sold on it. Aaliyah Boston, 4 points.
Aaliyah Boston's performance was perhaps the most concerning part of the entire night. She finished with only 4 points and 7 rebounds, going 0 for 3 from the field. I don't care how much people want to talk about her defensive impact. You cannot pay someone one of the richest contracts in WNBA history to score 4 points. She was struggling to move a 117-pound Cameron Brink out of the way on the lower block. If you can't establish post position against a player that light, that is a major problem. We are seeing a lack of development in her post game that is forcing the Fever to become a one-dimensional pick-and-roll team.
I want to tell me, this is one of the richest contracts in WNBA history. You should never have 4 points, dog. Never should have 4 points. And I don't care about the defense. You don't pay somebody over $1 million just to play fucking defense. Please, cut it. Shout out to Joey Gladstone. Kelsey Mitchell, 23 points, no rebounds, no assists, 2 turnovers, 1 steal. Kelsey, I just need to see that swing more, man. Like, you can add so much more to your game if you were to just swing it occasionally. I don't want it. I don't need it every time. I'm not going to try to turn you into something you're not. But just an occasional swing, would do wonders.
The reliance on the pick and roll is becoming a crutch that is hindering the entire offense. It's the same play over and over again. Pick and roll, pick and roll, pick and roll. If that isn't working, the entire system falls apart. Aaliyah Boston needs to develop some actual post moves so she can be a threat when the perimeter game isn't clicking. Instead, she ended up fouling out because she couldn't use her size effectively to establish position. It's frustrating to watch a former #1 pick struggle with the physical aspects of the game against players who are significantly smaller than her. The Masterclass was being undermined by a total lack of interior presence. Stephanie White's bench management is genuinely baffling at this point. Why is Michaela Timpson losing minutes to players like Damiris Dantis or Maisha Hines-Allen? It makes zero sense to anyone watching the game. Timpson misses one layup and gets banished to the bench, while other players can go out there, fail to play defense, and stay on the floor for 20 minutes. The inconsistency is killing the team's chemistry. You have Raven Johnson, who only got 6 minutes of playing time last night. What did she do to deserve that kind of punishment? Why is Tiara Harris coming off the bench before her? These are the questions that are driving the fans absolutely insane. The Sparks' comeback was fueled by the Fever's inability to slow the game down. Kelsey Mitchell, also known as Money Mitch, is a phenomenal scorer, but there are moments where she needs to give the ball up. She has a habit of pounding the ball into the floor for 10 seconds straight while everyone else stands around watching. When the Sparks were making their run, the Fever needed to settle the offense and make smart decisions. Instead, it was more ISO ball and forced shots. If Kelsey would just swing the ball occasionally, it would open up so much more for the entire team. You don't have to change who you are, but you have to be willing to facilitate. Watching Caitlin Clark move off the ball is a beauty to behold, but it only works if her teammates actually look for her. There were multiple sequences where CC was cutting backdoor or finding open space, and her teammates were looking the complete opposite direction. It is not rocket science to play with a generational talent like Clark. If your defender is sleeping or staring at the ball handler, you cut. If she's moving, you find her. It's basketball 101, yet the Fever make it look like they are trying to solve a complex physics equation. The lack of offensive awareness from the supporting cast is what allowed the Sparks to smell blood in the water. Cameron Brink is another player who seems to be losing some of her luster as the season progresses. She was out there celebrating a bucket like she just won the Kentucky Derby, only for Caitlin Clark to take it right back at her and score immediately. I think I might be getting off the Cameron Brink train after watching her performance last night. The frustration of watching her play is starting to outweigh the highlights. She ended up fouling out and struggled to contain the Fever's penetration. While the media loves the hype, the actual on-court production is starting to leave a lot to be desired, especially in high-pressure comeback situations. The Sparks' late-game surge was a wake-up call that this Fever team is far from being a finished product. They had a massive lead and almost let it slip away because they stopped doing what made them successful in the first half. Stephanie White seemed to have no answers for the Sparks' defensive adjustments. The panic was palpable. When you have a masterclass performance from your star player, you have to be able to close the door. Instead, the Fever were fumbling the ball, missing rotations, and playing with a level of indecision that was painful to watch. They were lucky to escape with a win, but it felt like a moral defeat in many ways. Lexi Hull is another player who is starting to draw some heat for her one-dimensional play. You are getting paid a professional salary now. You cannot just be a defensive specialist who contributes 1 point in a game. That is not going to fly anymore. The bench as a whole was a disaster, described by many as trash and garbage. When your starters are tired and the momentum is shifting, you need the bench to provide a spark. Instead, the Fever's bench provided nothing but turnovers and missed assignments. If Timpson and Johnson don't start getting at least 15 minutes each, this team is going to burn out before the playoffs. The atmosphere in the venue was electric, with fans coming out in droves to support Caitlin Clark and the Fever. But as the Sparks started their comeback, you could feel the air being sucked out of the arena. People didn't pay to see a collapse. They paid to see a masterclass. The fact that the game even became competitive in the fourth quarter is an indictment of the coaching staff's inability to maintain a lead. Stephanie White needs to take a long look in the mirror and figure out why her team falls apart the moment the pressure turns up. A win is a win, but this one left a very bitter taste in everyone's mouth. Caitlin Clark finished with another near double-double, but the 6 turnovers are the stat that critics will point to. However, many of those turnovers were the result of teammates not being ready for her passes or failing to move to the correct spots. When you are playing at a different speed than everyone else on the floor, these things happen. The masterclass was still evident in her vision and her ability to get to the rim at will. If she just lived in the mid-range and the paint during this game, it could have been a legendary performance. The frustration comes from seeing her settle for threes when she is clearly the best athlete on the floor. The Sparks' comeback was spearheaded by a sudden burst of energy that the Fever simply couldn't match. They started hitting shots that were missing in the first half, and suddenly the lead was down to single digits. Stephanie White was pacing the sideline, looking like she didn't know which fire to put out first. The defensive rotations were slow and the communication was non-existent. It's in these moments that a coach earns their paycheck, and White looked completely out of her depth. If not for a few clutch plays from Clark and Mitchell late in the fourth, we would be talking about one of the biggest collapses in franchise history. Let's talk about the officiating for a second, because it definitely played a role in the frantic nature of the ending. There were calls that seemed to favor the Sparks' aggressive comeback attempt, which only added to the Fever's frustration. But you can't blame the refs for missing layups and turning the ball over 6 times. The Fever had the game in their hands, and they let it become a dogfight. The Masterclass was almost ruined by a lack of discipline. It's a recurring theme for this team. They show flashes of brilliance followed by long stretches of absolute chaos. They need to find a way to bridge that gap if they want to be contenders. The post-game analysis was brutal, with many questioning the direction of the team under Stephanie White. Fans are tired of the excuses about the pick-and-roll game or the youthful mistakes. We are seeing high-paid veterans look lost on the court while young talent is buried on the bench. The Sparks game was a microcosm of everything wrong with the current system. You have a superstar in Caitlin Clark who is doing everything she can to carry the load, but the supporting cast and the coaching strategy are often working against her. The panic we saw on the sideline wasn't just about one game, it was about the realization that things aren't clicking. Damaris Dantas and Myesha Hines-Allen are taking up valuable minutes that should be going to the future of this franchise. Dantas doesn't even play defense, yet she stays on the floor while others are yanked for the slightest mistake. It's this kind of favoritism or rigid coaching that stalls development. The Fever need energy, they need athleticism, and they need players who aren't afraid of the moment. Instead, they are relying on a rotation that looks sluggish and uninspired. The Sparks' comeback was allowed to happen because the Fever didn't have the right personnel on the floor to stop the bleeding when the momentum shifted. At the end of the day, the Indiana Fever walked away with a victory, but it was one of those wins that felt like a loss. The celebration was muted because everyone knew how close they came to a total disaster. Caitlin Clark's Masterclass was the only reason they had a lead to begin with, and it's a shame that the narrative had to shift to the Sparks' comeback and Stephanie White's panic. The potential for this team is sky high, but they are being held back by a lack of identity and poor execution. If they don't fix these issues soon, the next comeback they face might actually be successful, and the fallout will be massive. The highlights of the game show Caitlin Clark pushing the tempo and hitting teammates for easy buckets, but the full game tape tells a much more stressful story. It was a game of runs, a game of errors, and a game that showed exactly why the Fever are the most talked about team in the league. Everyone is watching to see if they can finally put it all together. Last night was a step in the right direction in terms of the win column, but a giant leap backward in terms of team cohesion. The Sparks might be struggling, but they exposed flaws in the Fever that every other team in the league is going to exploit. As we look forward, the pressure on Stephanie White is only going to increase. You cannot have your star player putting on a masterclass while you are losing control of the game on the sideline. The fans are savvy, they see the questionable rotations, and they see the lack of offensive variety. The Fever need to decide what kind of team they want to be. Are they going to be the team that dominates the first half and coasts to victory, or the team that plays with fire every single night? The Masterclass deserves better, and until the coaching and supporting cast step up, every game is going to feel like a high-stakes gamble.